right, it's starting the okay, perfect. So it's asking us to so start the video recording, begin the discussion by asking one of the team members the following questions. Okay. Do you guys, like, after reading the case, did you guys believe that the varsity members engaged in too much conflict?
I think they allowed themselves to engage in conflict, but I didn't see any conflict. I think it was just internal in each one of them.
Like I don't think that they viewed it as conflict. I think that they were just really grumpy. What did they call disruptors? I think they're all disruptors without realizing it.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, like, I guess what was the conflict really about? It was just more like they individually thought like that they were like good rowers, but like as a team they just kind of got frustrated with each other, or like what do you think the conflict was like caused by?
I think it was because they were focused on so much on the other person that they failed to see their own problems. You know, like they gave an example of the junior varsity. They were all leading each other on. They were all, you know, saying, you know, we have nothing to lose. So they were all on the same page. They were a team, where the other ones, they were so busy worrying about what the other ones weren't doing. They failed to notice what they weren't doing.
I also think that like part of it was like they would like try to compensate the other rowers and try to get in sync with the other rowers when it said like if like someone became out of sync, that they should be the ones who like realize that they're out of sync and like start synchronizing their strokes with the other teammates. So I think that was an issue as well. And then one of the last questions is there an appropriate place for conflict among the members of the varsity crew or among the members of any team?
I think there is.
Yeah.
But I also think it should be overt, and theirs weren't. For lack of a better way of saying it, they were fighting like girls. You know, they weren't like. I mean, that's what girls do. They do it passive aggressively. You know, where guys are, you know, like. I don't know.
Paul, what do you think?
Pretty much along the same lines. What they're doing is they're trying to, towards the end of it, you could tell that each one of them was in their own mind figuring out what the problem was with the team, and they were thinking to themselves what the other members of the team thought of them. They weren't asking what the team thought of them. They were projecting what the team thought of them. And instead of working together as a team and talking about things and figuring out where they were at, they just assumed each other that everyone was thinking or talking about them.
Yeah.
And instead of actually talking about it and getting it out in the open where you could find out if it mattered or not. There she is.
I'm on my phone. It won't go on my computer, so we got it.
Okay.
And so then it says a note for like the discussion leaders. It says that there's two types of team conflict. There's task conflict, where people disagree about what task is to be accomplished. And so for our case, I don't really think it is that one. It says that there's another one that's called affect conflict, where people have interpersonal conflict, where people get frustrated and angry with one another. And I think that's the kind of conflict that's faced in the varsity team, where they know that like what their goal is to row as fast as they can, so they like beat the other teams. But I think they're having difficulty dealing and getting frustrated with one another.
I would agree.
Yeah. All right.
I
And
think
then
it's very. I thought it was very telling in the last of the story when he made them all get together, and they all said, "Well, I'm the one holding them together, or one pulling all the weight." But each one of them felt that way. So
Yeah, I think it's human nature in a way where we all end up. I think as humans, we push ourselves towards self-destruction. And when you start doing that, you're just like in this case, they took the team with them in their own destructive thinking instead of opening up so that they didn't have to do that.
I think this is a good example of Christ. Because they say like Elder Bednar is a big, and I think that these guys, none of them looked outside of themselves, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yep.
They were too busy, or either that or they were looking outside themselves to find fault and not to find useful criticism. Isn't that what we learned about this week? Useful criticism.
we have quite a few more questions to get through.
Okay.
Oh, sweet.
So the next set of questions is, what role did trust play in the problems varsity crew faced? And then some subset questions are, is trusting other rowers necessary for the crew team's success? We kind of already talked about all of this, like where like they were like relying too much on like themselves and were too concerned about what the other people were doing and not focusing on what they were doing or weren't doing. But how does trust play a role?
Well, to
Well, I
work
think
as a
you gotta
team.
trust. Sorry.
No, go ahead. I was listening. Sorry.
No, I think in anything you do, if you're playing on a team or anything, you've got to trust your teammates, because if you don't trust them, you're not gonna play well with each other, because you're gonna always be second guessing what they're trying to do instead of working together and going forward.
I liked what they said that because when they were talking about rowing, like they said nobody's going to do 200 perfect strokes. So you have to trust that teammate will find their rhythm again and just keep on with your own. So I guess that's a level of trust. You just have to trust that they're going to rejoin, I guess. I don't know.
No, I think that's exactly what it's saying. Is like you need to trust that your teammates are gonna like you're gonna pick up the slack for your teammates sometimes, and sometimes your teammates will pick up the slack for you, and in the end, it all evens out in like how much work you do. But I think that's kind of what it's getting at, is just that like no one's perfect, but you kind of need to trust that like your teammates will like catch you when you fall, kind of thing.
And without that, you overcompensate, which is what everybody there was doing, right? Because they all thought they were holding the weight of the team, but you would only feel that if you were trying to correct others' mistakes, I guess, maybe. I don't know.
Sounds right.
What happened towards the end of the case when the coach switched varsity individuals with JV individuals?
The varsity team won again.
Mm-hmm. So when the varsity team switched out some JV,
or no, what
I
did
thought
happen?
it made it worse. So it reaffirmed the fact that the strongest players were on the varsity team, because when you took out some of the strongest players, maybe.
Yeah, when he changed them, the JVs became faster.
Yeah, the JVs.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes.
And
So
so yeah, kind of proves that like the varsity rowers were better, but they just performed better when they were on the junior varsity boat, which is kind of counterintuitive. Is because they had like better rhythm and like work together as a team.
They had the better rhythm, and I think what happened is when he took the varsity member and put it on the junior varsity boat, that what happened is the junior varsity automatically tried to keep up with the varsity member because they viewed him as the leader.
Yeah.
So they automatically became in sync with his rhythm and they became faster. And the problem with the varsity team is that once they brought JV down to their boat, they thought that they were going to have to teach instead of doing what they were supposed to do and have that person follow them and learn from them.
In the case, it talks about how the varsity team really didn't have a leader. Like they were just kind of like in it to win it for themselves kind of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's an important distinction between the varsity team and the junior varsity team.
The question I would have is, when they were brought down to the junior varsity team and they felt how the team moved, why didn't they try and take that back to the varsity team and address it there?
I don't know. I'm not a rower, so I think it might be something that's intangible, like something that's just kind of like something they just kind of do like instinctually. And so like when like they're probably rowing, the varsity team is probably rowing the same. It's the junior varsity team that like kind of like Paul was saying, they would like sync up their strokes with the varsity person that came into their boat. And so they didn't really notice like that they were doing anything different. I think they just like the people around them were doing things different.
I guess that makes sense. They said the first time they got on the water, they got that swing, that perfect stride. And then they went downhill after that. So I guess that makes sense. So they knew what it felt like. They just couldn't keep it. Sorry. Sometimes I overthink.
Yeah, it's the same in every sport. I mean, I don't know how many of you have played sports, but I look nice and young, but I was actually younger. Playing volleyball and basketball was a lot like it is for this crew team, where you have to have a defined leader. And that leader doesn't have to be one person. That leader can be the entire team if you're as a group. That's why the JV crew they were consistent, because they all viewed each other as one group, as a lead. So they were all leaders. They were just following each other perfectly in sync. They just didn't have the strength. The problem with the varsity team is they were always trying to figure out who the leader was and who wasn't doing their job. And in sports, like I said, for me, when I was playing basketball, if one of us didn't know who was leading the team at the time, we never won the games. And in volleyball, if you don't know who is your pin start on the court, you're going to lose. You got to have somebody that's kind of pulling the team around so that you know where you're headed and what your goals are. And that's what this varsity team didn't realize, is that they had no leader. They all thought the other person was supposed to be leading them and was failing at the job.
All right, next question.
Those are great points. There's a third question. How did the rivalry between the two boats influence the varsity's performance?
I think it helped it crash and burn, because when they lost, they just became more and more frustrated and more checked Like, didn't it say they became more dejected and disconnected as a team?
Yeah.
Started to place a lot more blame too.
Winning, and they weren't.
Yeah. Would the varsity have faster times if they only practice alone? Do you guys think?
No.
You don't think so?
No.
I don't think so, because they weren't communicating.
Yeah.
Well, didn't
Really?
one of the people say that having the junior varsity there gave them a good measure of how they were? It was hard to race against the clock. You know, I think when you're competing in person, it's a lot easier because you see that person getting ahead. You know, I think it's more motivating.
Didn't they say in the case that it wasn't that the junior varsity team was getting faster; it was that the varsity team was getting slower?
Yeah.
Yep.
It was in there.
Do you think it was because like the junior varsity team was like there, that they were getting frustrated with each other and kind of like started like, I don't know, not arguing or bickering, but just like the negative like negative like environment, like a kind of a hostile environment for like the varsity team's performance?
I'm sure it was, but I also don't think isolating them would have helped because that's not the way. Because we're going to have to compete, and whatever their problem was internal. And for you to ignore that internal problem and just work your way around it isn't going to help you, in my opinion.
What other factors besides those listed in bullets 1 to 3 do you see contributing to the varsity crew's problems? So bullets 1 to 3.
Let's see, what are the bullets?
Yeah, I don't know what the bullets are.
Let me go back.
Yeah, let's give. How did the varsity's problem evolve over time? Is there a key point where their downward spiral started? I think their downward spiral kind of started when they were just kind of like practicing against the junior varsity, and the junior varsity were beating them, and they were like, "Well, we're better rowers than them," and they just like weren't working as a team, and they got frustrated with each other. I think once they started getting frustrated with each other, and they tried to do it themselves, then it kind of just like went downhill fast.
I think they were
I
getting
agree with.
frustrated.
I agree.
I think they were getting more frustrated. Okay.
Go ahead, Candace.
I think they were getting more frustrated because they saw the JV team working better together as a team and improving themselves, and the varsity team couldn't figure out how to make that happen for their team, because one would step up and be more of a leader going, I can do this on my own. They weren't working together as a team to make the strokes count for them when they were rowing. The JV team was. They were working together as a team. They were just one. So I think that's what frustrated the varsity team.
See, and I think I agree with you that that's when the downward spiral happened. And I think that's when it became noticeable to outside forces. But I think it happened before then, because I don't think the JV team would have ever won had they had their stuff together to begin with. Because they were a stronger, better team if they could have worked together as a team.
Yeah.
I think it was just evidence that there was a problem.
Should the coach have stepped in to provide better leadership himself, or should he have encouraged one of the team members to provide leadership? How do you think that lack of leadership on the varsity team should have been addressed?
I like the way he addressed it in the end. I just think he should have done it sooner. Like, he was so worried about whether the right people were on the team that he failed to notice there was other factors, I think. Or he knew about it. He documented it, that there was no leadership, that there was disruptors. So I think he should have pulled them all in and figured it out before 2 days before the race.
Yeah.
So he did it well. He just should have done it sooner. I agree.
I agree.
So what should Coach P have done different earlier in the season to resolve the problem?
He should have spent time with the groups and gotten them to work as a group. And even if he spent half an hour with them alone, and then get them to work through things as a group, or had more activities where they were operating as a group outside of the boat and not just in the rowing situation.
Be team members outside of their sport, not just in their sport.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. At what point do you think he should have intervened? Like, when do you think he should have, like you were saying earlier, that like he should have stepped in earlier? At like exactly what point should he have stepped in?
He should have stepped in to recognize the situation when they first left Atlanta and they had beaten their original winning score or their winning time. He should have stepped in there and built on that situation rather than waiting to see what happened after that situation.
Well, like,
so how? Oh, sorry.
at that point, like, wasn't everything going well at that point though? Like, if they beat their score, it's like, oh well, they're doing well. Like, why? Like, if it's not broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. Like, why wouldn't he go with that kind of mentality?
Well, it says in the story that they noticed in the first week back at school that there was a problem, that things weren't the same as they were when they left Atlanta.
I don't play sports, so I guess I don't know if you do it when you very first notice it, or do you let them try and figure it out? And if you do let them try and figure it out and find their own groove, how long do you wait? I wouldn't say the entire season, that's for sure, but since all those sports, I'm going to go with his answer.
Like,
I'm sorry, Darren.
I play hockey, so it's a little different. It's just like, it's a team sport. For us, they always gave us like a couple games just to kind of like figure out who we liked playing with and like what like the lineup should be, because like your shifts are like, there's basically 4 lines and there's like 45-second shifts, and so they would just rotate us and see who we liked playing with, and like kind of like the chemistry that like kind of went on. And like sometimes we just need to get used to a player, and then like we'd be able to play with them really well. And so like I'm not sure if that's the same in all sports or in rowing, but like they gave us like a little bit of time to like figure out if we like playing with them, and like kind of like not give us our choice of line mates, but like who would play well together, and then put us together as like a line, and then we would play with that line for like the majority of the season unless something changed.
So they addressed the fact that you guys need to work as a team from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I think that's with all sports.
Yeah, with all sports. Yeah. You just kind of like have to see who you play well with.
Yeah.
At what point do you think he should, or I guess we did that one. Okay, so it says be specific about how you think an intervention would have helped them. I think an intervention would have helped them kind of like see that like their problem is that they're like trying to pull their team in different directions. They're kind of working against each other by like rowing at different times and just kind of like not working together, I guess, working as individuals instead of as a team. Do you guys have any other thoughts on that?
I think it was more mental than just working as a team. I think it was animosity, or contention between the players. I think it would have allowed them to put everything out on the table, get it out in the air, address it, or decide whether you needed to figure out a different game plan. Maybe switch up some of the JVs, even if they're not stronger. Maybe they would have worked better on the team. Just like some of the strongest players were put on the JV team just because they couldn't work as a team.
I think part of it when you go. Sorry, go ahead, Candace.
No, an intervention. I think if they had done like a team building exercise, because you hear about it a lot in anything that you do, when you have those team building exercises, you kind of tend to get to know who the people really are, and you start to work better with them, and you build that trust. So if they could have just built the trust better, there would have been a lot, probably more victories for them.
So you're saying do it as preventative instead of as cleanup.
Yeah.
Do it in the beginning. Preempt it.
Yeah.
So what sport did you play, Candace? I'm sorry.
I was volleyball.
Sorry, I was just saying at one point in the story, it's right near the beginning. I believe it's in this one where the coach says that he could see that if there was an issue with the JV, they would look to each other and say, you know what, we had a bit of a problem there. I'm so sorry. Let's get this thing built up. Or if they were winning, they would say, we work so good together as a team. I'm so glad you're able to do this and I'm able to do that. And the problem with the varsity team is they would walk away from each other at the end of a row and not realize that they hadn't built the ability to communicate with each other and say, look, I think I messed up here. I think I need to improve in this area. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
And instead of asking each other for help and constructive criticism, they were beating themselves up with their own criticism in their own minds. And that's more destructive than someone else trying to do something. And it's no different in a position once you've got a job. Like in my situation, I'm used to running my own company and doing my own thing and what I say goes kind of thing. And that's not the way I'm doing things now. I'm actually under someone else. I need to be accountable to someone else. I need to be accountable to an actual rather large group of people. And it's interesting now how much more help you get if you stand back and say, you know what, this is what I want to work on this year. This is where I think I need to go. What do you guys think? And what do you think I can do to improve? And that was hard for me to do because I'm used to running my own company and I have for my whole life. So once you start asking, you'd be surprised how many more people start coming your way, because there's a few of them that I wanted to throw under the bus and just kind of stamp on top of them because they were driving me nuts and holding me back. And now I actually go to them for assistance and they come to me for assistance, and things get done a lot quicker.
Okay, so you're saying what exactly should have been done by the coach is just kind of having them sit down with each other and just kind of like humbling themselves and realizing that like it's not just the whole team's at fault. Like there's things that they need to improve on. Yeah. And they need to be willing to accept like recommendations from their teammates to be better. Okay, that's fair. I think that's a great point. Thanks, Paul.
I agree.
Okay, so it ends off with the case ends off with Coach P on Tuesday, kind of like coming to a decision of what he should do. What do you think he should have done, like, on that day, on the Tuesday?
Personally, I think he should have had a party.
Have a party?
I think he should have gone and said, look, this has all gone amazing. Everything is working out perfect. I know you guys don't like where you're at and you seem like you're struggling, but from my point of view, because realistically, from the coach's point of view, he had 4 rowers or 8 rowers in this boat that were amazing. The problem is they didn't know that as a group, but the coach knew it. He knew that if he individualized or even twinned them, that he got amazing results. Like, they were stronger than they ever were the year before. They were more coordinated than they were before. The problem is they all started thinking someone else was going to carry them, and it just started slowing them down. And I think he needed, like I said, a party to boost them and get their morale back up where it needed to be.
Yeah, I think that's a great.
So I wouldn't have gone with the party. I actually liked what he did. I like people to tell me when I'm doing something wrong. I like black and white people. I like to know where I stand. So as a result of that, I appreciate what he did to begin with. All right, you guys sit down, talk about it. You guys need to be open with each other. Start figuring out and start taking accountability for your actions instead of just looking at other people's actions. And then I would have thrown a party, maybe. But I like addressing that. I don't know. I like having the blunt conversations. I prefer them.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all kind of prefer, like, blunt, honest feedback in theory, but sometimes it's kind of hard to take when it's, like, actually given. Because, I mean, like, for me, like, I always liked ideas on how I could improve and become better when I was on a mission. But sometimes when, like the feedback actually came back, it was like things that I really didn't want to change, if that makes sense.
It does.
It was just it was definitely harder. And so, like, sometimes I wish the feedback was easier to follow almost. Like, it was just more like, oh, like, you're doing a good job, like, keep going. But when it's something that I actually, like, deep down need to change, it was a little harder for me, I think.
Or if it had aligned with the goals that you were already working on or already focused on, you would have been like, sweet, I'm on the right path. I get it.
Yeah, but if it's something totally that's course reversing, it's a little harder. So this part 3, it says, what should the coach do now? Be specific on exactly what you think he should do and why and how it will impact the team. And then what are the pros and cons of each idea. So, like, I guess we talked about throwing a party. The pros of that is, like, you're kind of rewarding their efforts already thus far. You're kind of showing how much, like, the coach appreciates them, and just kind of helps boost their morale. Are there any cons to throwing a party? I think the only one I can think of is just you're kind of rewarding, like, subpar effort. It's almost like handing out a participation trophy at sporting events. It's kind of like making everyone a winner, which kind of de-incentivizes people.
Well, plus on top of that, a lot of these team members were second year. You know, like, wasn't that one of the things he was excited about? Was it? So they should have known better.
Yeah, I agree. They should.
But like Paul said, it could also boost the morale and kind of rev them up, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
I would have, I mean, it's just because I'm used to that kind of thing, but I probably would have had, I guess party might be the wrong word, even though it turns out to be a party in the end. is that both teams should have been included with each other, so that the varsity team would get the feedback of the JVs and understand what they thought of the situation. And part of the con to that is that you could create, you could end up creating physical conflict. Because I know, Darren, if you've been playing hockey, you know where the physical conflict will come in with certain teams, and it's not an easy thing. It creates conflict, but at the same time, a year later, the person you were just beating the socks off of may be in your lineup, and all of a sudden you got to learn to be able to meld with that person to be a winning team. So one of the cons is you're going to start a fight. And I guess the pros is you're going to start a fight that may result in some good results as well as bad.
Yeah, definitely. And like, you know, just being physical with the other team and like just working with people, like when you like, yeah, exactly. I think you said it really well, Paul.
Yeah, he did.
So do you guys find it interesting that he chose not to switch the teams to just because that was one of his options, is to just make the JV team the varsity team and vice versa?
Yeah, but it doesn't solve his problem with them, because it just, from a psychological point of view, I think he would drive a knife into
Put the nail in the coffin.
As a self-destructive method. So he needs to get them to understand that they're self-destructive and get them to come out of that spiral that they're in, because they're going downhill and not up.
Yeah.
I would agree, but wasn't it the last race of the season?
Yep.
All right. Are you guys ready to hear the resolution to the case?
Yeah.
All right. So it says letting conflicts fester. It says Colonel Stan Przezuski, coach of the Army crew at West Point a few years ago, faced baffling problem. Through extensive testing, he developed objective criteria to rank his rowers. Put the 8 based on his dream team in the varsity boat and the 8 others in the junior varsity boat. The problem was the junior varsity boat beat the varsity 2/3 of the time. The reason why was the varsity was full of resentment over who was contributing most, while the JV, feeling they had nothing to lose, supported one another happily. One day, Przezuski lined up the varsity crew in 4 pairs. He told them they were to wrestle, no punching, for 90 seconds. There were no clear winners. Each man was discovering that his opponent was just as strong and determined as he was. Przezuski then had them change opponents and wrestle again. By the 3rd round, they were choosing their own opponents. One guy would point at another and say, "You," Przezuski says. Finally, one of the rowers started laughing, and they all piled into a general brawl. Eventually, someone said, "Coach, can we go row now?" From then on, the varsity boat flew. You probably can't order members of executive team to wrestle, tempting though it may be, but bringing tensions out in the open and then resolving them is one of the team leader's most important jobs. Okay.
Well, look, I think we're right on track.
They just needed a good old brotherly wrestling fighting match just to kind of get the tensions out there, I guess.
Yeah.
They needed to stop fighting like girls and start fighting like boys.
Exactly.
No, that's good. That's exactly what they needed. They need some time to. It's like a big group of Boy Scouts. Got to get them to realize they can't climb the mountain alone.
Exactly. Yeah. You just really need to like understand that like they were frustrated with each other, and that's okay to be frustrated with each other. You just gotta once you're frustrated, you just need to get it out there and then work on your problems as a group rather than just kind of, I don't know, letting individual resentment fester and just like that blame that they have for the other people just kind of like fester in their consciousness, I guess. But why do you think this response worked?
I think it allowed them to address the emotions. It allowed them to maybe not consciously, but to look at them and dismiss them and move forward, and to also connect with those team members that they needed to connect with.
I think it also showed that each one of them was just as strong as the next one. That, you know, they all had this strength, but there was something in there that was bothering them, you know, so they couldn't work together.
The last question is, what can you learn from this that might apply to a team in a business setting? I think it's kind of what we were talking about, is just like getting the conflict out in the open and then working on it together instead of letting it fester.
I do like the point that they make as far as like you have to be conscious of your environment. Like, you know, I say I like black and white. I like people to be straight with me, but I also think you can do it nice. I don't think you have to be mean about it.
Yeah, I agree. Like there's a way of going about things where you're getting the problem out there and it's open, but at the same time you're not personally attacking the person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I agree. Or you're not doing all the petty stuff that doesn't matter.
All right, and then this is the last part. We have to go around and each team member needs to say what was the most important thing they learned about the case. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Most important thing I learned from the case by going through what they did is realizing that there was a major lack of communication, whether physical or verbal. The communication, just like you said in the wrestling, that's a physical communication. They're still talking, they're just doing it without words and letting each other know that they're on the same level.
I guess I'll go.
Oh, yeah.
Candace?
you go.
Right. I think for me, what I liked about the case is that he looked at everything before deciding that was what the problem was. So I learned that it's okay to look at all the factors, but once you figure out what is the driving problem, you need to address it. Don't just let it sit there. That's what I think I learned.
I think for me it was being how do you put this? There was no communication, and you know how you have to know how important the communication is in anything that you do. If you're working in a company, if the company doesn't talk with each other and communicate, if there's a problem or anything, it just builds and gets worse than what it could ever be. So with them not talking and communicating from the very beginning, when they started seeing that there was a problem working together, it just kind of kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and towards the end it kind of exploded on them. And the same way goes when you're working in a company. If you have an issue, or if you're having a hard time working with someone else and you don't talk about it and you don't say, hey, this is what's bothering me, you're not going to have good teamwork and you can't work together. So it kind of showed to me that communication and teamwork go hand in hand, and you need both of them to make anything successful.
That's a good point. Thank you for sharing. I guess the one thing that I kind of learned from this case that really stuck out to me most was just that like the sum is greater than the parts. Like each of those rowers were individually really strong and they're great rowers, but when they were put in a team environment, they weren't able to work together. And I think when you're in a company or an organization, you could be the brightest individual in the group. You could be the most talented. You could be the most insightful or have the most knowledge. But like, unless you're able to work with others and impart that knowledge to others and be able to make others better as well, I think that's really the mark of a true leader, is being able to make those around you better. I think just understanding that working in a team environment is almost more important than your individual ability, at least in terms of this case. Okay, and then the next, this is just like the feedback and wrap up. The next one is ask each team member to rate the overall quality of today's discussion from 0 to 10.
I like you guys, so I rate it high. How about a 9, since nothing's perfect?
9? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, because you guys talk. You guys participate. I like you guys.
Thank you. Thank you too.
I would say a 9 too.
All right, 9s across the board. Sounds good. Ask what you did as a discussion leader that they liked. So what did you guys like that I did this week? Sorry, I wasn't more like of a leader. Just
I like that you kept us
the
focused and on task.
You kept it moving right along with question after question.
I agree with the other two. You kept us on task, you kept us moving, and you gave us feedback. I like all of it.
Awesome. Then what can I do better next time?
First thing you could do is show us what team is on that hat so we know whether or not to mock you.
Oh, just a company that I got a job with. And
bummer.
They gave me a free. So
Ernst Young is giving you a bunch of toys to play with, huh?
You can mock me for being an accounting major, I guess.
Oh, we will. Don't worry. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, giving feedback, especially when what you can improve, is difficult. It's hard to be candid when you don't know someone yet. You're trying to make a good impression, I guess.
Yeah.
I would give you feedback, but I thought it went well, honestly. And you set up the Google Hangouts, and I think you did a good job. So.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate
you did a good job.
No, it's good.
I think that's it for our group meeting today. Is there anything that we need to fill out? No.
Before we go, can we just talk about time? Is this time good for everybody, or